This morning, we follow in the footsteps of Charles Darwin and the Beagle and anchor in Tagus Cove, a natural anchorage. It's been a popular destination for ships for centuries. The name of the site dates back to 1814 when it was visited by a British Navy frigate, the HMS Tagus. Tagus Cove was formed when the ocean breached one side of a volcanic tuff cone. This bay has been a hideout for whalers and pirates who started a tradition of inscribing their ships' names on the cliff face. And these are two examples of some of the earlier dated petroglyphs that we noticed. This was a dry landing, but it turned out two pairs of cormorants had taken over the stairs for their nesting sites. So we ended up detouring around them on the rocks below. Cormorants usually make their nests only a few meters away from the ocean, and they have these bright turquoise eyes that really stand out against our dark plumage. As we continue to walk inland, we see several of these endemic Galapagos cotton plants. The cotton is not cultivated or harvested, but it is used by small birds as nesting material. Nesting birds in the Galapagos have been hit hard by this avian vampire fly, which was accidentally introduced here in the 1960s. Chicks in a nest that is infected with the larvae of these flies have a very low survivability. So Joed was telling us this interesting story about the propensity of finches to use cotton in their nests. It was about Sarah Nudi, a conservation ecologist who was working with the Charles Darwin Research Station, studying the mortality of finch chicks in nests infected with the vampire fly. She came up with this idea of putting insecticide-soaked cotton ball dispensers for the birds to take treated cotton back to their nests. Later, when they examined the nests, they showed that the ones with treated cotton were either free of parasites or at least had significantly fewer than the nests with untreated cotton. So we continue on the steep but short hiking trail. It takes us up to Darwin Lake inside the volcanic tuff cone. This lake has twice the salinity of the ocean. So how did saltwater get all the way up here? Scientists think maybe tsunamis caused by eruptions or landslides on nearby Fernandina Island may have deposited seawater here initially, and then over time evaporation has made it even more salty. The tuff cone we're hiking on is composed of many layers of ash that represent multiple explosive events over time. This particular sequence that we're looking at, it's about 3 feet thick. It has a large number of these spherical nodules. Theory says these probably formed when rain fell through the ash clouds. The water droplets absorbed the ash, which then cooled and solidified into these small balls. The trail continues up to the crest of the tuff cone, where we are rewarded with a beautiful viewpoint overlooking the lower lava slopes of Volcan Darwin. There are several spatter cones on the crest here. These are the result of lava fountains from small vents that have shot up hot bits of lava that clump together on landing to form spatter. The vegetation in the area includes these Palo Santo trees or incense trees. They look dead most of the year, white-barked and leafless, but when the seasonal rains arrive, they green up. And in the distance, we can see the La Cumbre volcano that forms Isla Fernandina. The friendly and ubiquitous Galapagos lava lizard is the most common reptile found throughout the islands. The males can be recognized by this crest that runs along the length of their backs. On the way back, we stopped again at this overlook over Darwin Lake and took this great group photo. I've said this before in a previous video, but we really liked all the folks that were part of this, and that added a lot of enjoyment to our trip. After the hike, we take a panga ride along the coast. Here we're looking at the layers of tuff that make up the cone. Volcanic tuff is the result of an explosive interaction between hot lava and cold seawater. It ejects clouds of steam and tiny particles of rock that then precipitate down onto the flanks of the volcano and build up the cone. Sometimes bigger fragments are also ejected and are deposited along with the finer sediments, like we see here. In this layer, we see a much higher percentage of large fragments. Since larger fragments are heavier, they can't be carried too far from the crater. So this is evidence that these sediments would have been deposited close to the actual center of the eruption. One thing we've observed on our hikes is that tuff is a rock type that can be easily eroded into gullies by heavy rainfall. And here we see evidence of a similar hydrologic erosion of an old lava flow where layer A was deposited and then eroded during a rain event. And then the next eruption produced layer B, which infilled the gullies. These birds here in the crevice are Galapagos martins, a very dark colored swallow endemic to the Galapagos. The male is an entirely deep bluish black. The females and juveniles mostly brown. We stop at this location, watch the water rushing into, and then out of the sea cave. Heading back to the boat, we saw this group of 3 penguins and an iguana. And now for the synchronized head lift and butt waggle. Galapagos penguins are monogamous, each pair mating for life. They lay 1 or 2 eggs in these cool and dark lava caves, which offer protection from the sun. This pair looks like a parent and a young penguin who seems to be a bit undecided about how to best get into the water. Later on, we see another larger group of penguins in the water. Even when they're cruising along the surface, they're still using their flipper-like wings for swimming. Penguins are hunters, but they're also a food source for sharks. Their white bellies and dark backs help camouflage them when swimming. After lunch, we moved the boat from Tagus Cove to investigate a mangrove forest in Elizabeth Bay. Mangrove forests provide valuable habitat for terrestrial and marine species. However, the Galapagos coastline is pretty inhospitable to mangroves. Most of the coastline is rocky, steep, and exposed to wave activity with no permanent rivers or estuaries. There's no shore landing allowed at Elizabeth Bay, either wet or dry, so our visit involves pangas and kayaks. Galapagos mangroves usually grow directly on solid lava, and they help stabilize sediment, and that facilitates colonization by other plants and animals. One of the most distinctive features of mangroves are their above-ground roots. They grow down from the tree's branches until they penetrate the soil. And we can see mangroves provide habitat and nursery grounds to several species of fish. Only about 35% of the Galapagos coastline has mangroves, and of those, most are fairly small patches, with 80% of them less than 1/8 of an acre. And here's an interesting species living in the mangroves, a sea lion that's also a tree lion. Finishing our tour of the mangroves, we return with our kayaks to the boat and then head in for dinner. But meanwhile, this guy decides that this is just a place for a siesta. Well, that's it for this video about today's adventures, but keep watching for a description of our murder mystery movie night. It's movie night on the boat. Darwin meets Hitchcock in this true crime tale of paradise found and lost. The Galapagos Affair, Satan Came to Eden, is a documentary portrait of a 1930s murder mystery set on the Galapagos island of Floreana. And what's it about, we ask? Well, this seems intriguing. And here is the main cast, starting with the philosopher and his mistress. Fleeing conventional society, a Berlin doctor and his mistress have decided to start a new life on uninhabited Floreana Island. His choice of destination was inspired by this book, Galapagos World's End. Now, soon afterwards, another couple arrived, Heinz and Margaret Whitmer. As a side note, the Whitmer's son, Rolf, was the first recorded birth on Floreana, and later in life, Rolf went on to found the boat tour company that we were using for this trip. Although Ritter and Whitmer were not the best of friends, they were united in their dislike for the next arrivals, the last players in this drama, the Baroness, her lover, and her other lover. The Baroness of the Galapagos was Eloise von Wagner. She set up a homestead and then announced plans to build a grand hotel for wealthy yachtsmen right by the only freshwater stream on the island and where the Whitmers had homesteaded. Von Wagner arrives brandishing a pistol and declaring herself Empress of Floreana. She acts as though the other inhabitants are supposed to be her servants. Suddenly, this isn't a paradise, and tensions between the Baroness and the Whitmers, Ritter and Strauch, begin to build and build. On the 27th of March, 1934, the Baroness and her lover Philipson completely disappeared without a trace. According to Margaret Whitmer, the couple had set sail on a passing ship towards Tahiti. However, no such ship was ever recorded as having reached Galapagos shores. Did the Baroness and Philipson leave of their own accord? If so, why did they never reach Tahiti? Could the tension with other settlers have ended in tragic consequences? Did the Baroness's other lover have something to do with their mysterious disappearance? To add further to the mystery, the Baroness's other lover, Lorenz, left Galapagos very soon after. Trying to return back to Germany, he hopped aboard a small passing boat headed towards San Cristobal Island. Incredibly, neither he nor the Norwegian sailor ever made it to their destination. Months later, their remains were found mummified on Marchena Island, far off course from San Cristobal, where they had perished from dehydration. One final twist is that Friedrich Ritter also passed away from food poisoning very soon after the Baroness disappeared. He'd eaten chicken that had gone off, although many, including Margaret Whitmer, suspected Dory Strauch of deliberately poisoning. Dora herself returned to Germany. The Whitmers eventually moved to Black Beach on Floreana and built a small hotel. And so, what really happened on Floreana Island? In truth, we're unlikely ever to know. So Margaret Whitmer passed away in the year 2000, and she was the last person who could feasibly have solved the incredible Galapagos Affair mystery. Coincidentally, our tour boat company is Rolf Whitmer Turismo Galapagos, which we highly recommend. Founded in 1982 by Captain Rolf, the son of Margaret and Heinz Whitmer, the oldest settlers on the island. And that concludes day 5. Thanks for watching.